Let's see. Yes, so I hope you can see the screen. But today, yeah, we'll be talking about some questions in BECE science exam. And today we'll focus on problem solving. So, yeah, let's start off with a deficiency problem. So, if we read this question, a mother took her child to the hospital, and upon investigation, it was noticed that the child's diet was lacking in zinc. What could this result in? So, one is decreased growth in the child. Two is anemia and constipation. Three is inability of the body to fight infection. So, what do you think are some symptoms of lacking in zinc? Does anyone know the answer to this question? Or and I did list some symptoms on the right. Can everyone see
B,
the picture? Sorry, B, did you say?
B,
Oh, if you said B, then yeah, that's actually correct. Great job. The answer is B, 1 and 3 only. So 1 says decreased growth in the child. And yes, that's true. You can see here growth that's slower than expected. And that matches. Can everyone see that? Yeah, because all of these are symptoms of lacking in zinc. And if you look at 3, inability of the body to fight infection. And you can kind of see that with slow wound healing, and then things like rashes or skin lesions. All of those serve to um, say that the body is unable to fight infections. And anemia is more directly linked to iron deficiency. It's not about zinc deficiency. And diarrhea is a common symptom of deficiency and not constipation. So that's why the answer is B. Let's look at this next slide. Okay. So we just talked about zinc deficiency. So zinc is an essential mineral that plays a key role in many body functions. So zinc is important to our body because it supports our immune functions. So it protects our body. It helps with wound healing. It is essential for DNA synthesis. So, do you know what DNA synthesis is? It's basically just we learned about DNA last time, right? Being double-stranded, and then it just helps with building DNA. And it also has functions like cell growth. It is necessary for development, and it maintains the sense of taste and smell. And some of the sources for zinc are things like if you eat meat, you get a lot of zinc, or things like shellfish. especially oysters, and dairy products like milk or cheese. You get a lot of zinc. Whole grains, nuts and seeds, and beans, and etc. So, yeah, we just learned a few things about zinc, why it's important, and where we can get them. So, yeah, let's look at this next question. And this is about more deficiency. So, which of the following diseases results from malnutrition? Talking about malnutrition. What do you think this is? Oh, yes. If you said A, yeah, that's correct. So, yeah, like the text says, scurvy, you might be wondering, what is scurvy? So, scurvy is a disease caused by vitamin C deficiency. And malnutrition is any sort of deficiency. So, yeah, that's correct. Because scurvy is caused by vitamin C deficiency, which is a form of malnutrition. And scurvy happens when you eat not enough food, fruits and vegetables. And that's the main cause of this disease. And other choices like measles, malaria, gonorrhea are infectious diseases and not really a malnutrition. And they're caused by microorganisms instead. And symptoms of scurvy is like bleeding in the gums, easy bruising, and fatigue, anemia, etc. Like here. Yeah, so the answer was A. And let's look at another question, another deficiency question. Which of the following diseases is not a deficiency disease? We're asking for what's not a deficiency disease. You can take a little bit of a guess, but um, um, yeah, did someone say B? And if you said B, yeah, that's correct. Yeah, great job. And that's because we just saw that A, scurvy is vitamin C deficiency. So it is a deficiency. Yeah. But okay, and beriberi is a vitamin B1 deficiency. It's a specific vitamin B deficiency. So it's also a form of deficiency disease. And then goiter, the last one, is caused by iodine deficiency. And it's only cholera that is not a deficiency. It's a bacterial. It's an infectious disease. So yeah, we looked at a lot of different kinds of deficiency. So here is a table that summarizes the types of deficiencies and what symptoms you can have and the result. So for vitamin A, if you have a deficiency of vitamin A, you lose um, a lot of your vision. So symptoms are poor vision and loss of vision in the darkness. We saw that vitamin B1 has a deficiency disease called beriberi. And you can see in this picture here, this is a beriberi, vitamin B1 deficiency. It is linked with weak muscles and little energy to work. Vitamin C leads to scurvy. We've seen that. Bleeding of the gums and wounds are easy to be made. And there's also vitamin D. When you're lacking in vitamin D, you get what's called the rickets. And it's when the bones become soft and bent, that you can see here. This is vitamin D deficiency. And then for calcium, if you lack in calcium, then your bone and tooth decay because they're comprised mostly of calcium. So that's why they decay. And it leads to weak bones and tooth decays. And lack of iodine, we saw that it's called a goiter. So goiter, can everyone see this picture down right? It's it's when the thyroid is a little inflamed. It's swollen. The glands in the neck appear swollen like this. And it can often lead to things like mental disability in children as well. That's caused by iodine deficiency. And then finally, when we have iron deficiency, it leads to anemia. It's often linked with weakness of muscles and overall general weakness in the body. So those were some of the deficiency diseases that were linked. Okay. So before, what was not a deficiency disease was cholera. And we've seen that cholera is a bacterial infection and not a deficiency disease. It's caused by this bacteria called Vibrio cholerae, and it's spread through contaminated food or water. And if you get cholera, you get symptoms like watery diarrhea, vomiting, leg cramps, and very serious dehydration. So your body really gives out a lot of water by watery diarrhea and vomiting. So you need a lot of water to survive. And it is treatable with rehydration by either drinking or by the IV fluids connecting it to your veins. So, but it's important to know that cholera is spread by contaminated water or food. And you get these bacterias inside your intestines. So, okay. Next, let's talk about a little bit about protein deficiency when you lack in proteins. So, proteins, what they are, they serve as very important functions in our body. They build many structures of the cell, and they comprise of a lot, and they do a lot of functions, and they include things like enzymes and structures, exoskeletons of our cells, etc. So lacking proteins can be very harmful to our body. So one example is kwashiorkor, and this is a severe form of protein deficiency in children, and it often causes swelling. So when you see people like swelled up in their stomach, it's called edema. It leads to, enlarged livers and other types of skin issues, but you can tell that a person has kwashiorkor by looking at their swollen sort of in their stomach area. And if you lack in protein, you also have slowed growth. You also have weak muscles or this thing called marasmus. Marasmus is also the weakening and shriveling of muscles. So you appear very, very thin. Another form of um, lack of protein functions. And there's also fatigue and weakness. There's also hair and skin problems and delayed wound healing as well. These are some examples of what your body might experience if you lack in protein. So yeah, just know about what some of these are. And Yeah, I can wait a little bit for you to write down if you want, but I am, yeah, I can wait a little bit for you to finish. Yeah, can I move on to the next slide now? Or I will also share you the slides at the end, so if you have anything that you did not write down, you can look at those slides as well. But I just want to show you some pictures of what these symptoms look like. So kwashiorkor, you can notice that their stomach area is swollen. This is called edema. And then on the right is marasmus. And you can see that the muscles are shriveled and they look very, very thin. And both is caused by this lacking of proteins in our body. So yeah, on the right here lists some symptoms, and we've already looked at most of these. So yeah. Now let's move on to a little bit of our tooth and what sorts of disease, not really disease, but troubles our tooth can have. So the question is the very hard greenish black deposit around the corners of the teeth is known as what? Do you think the name is? Yeah, I'm hearing a few A's. Does anyone think it's another one? Um, what about other choices? Yeah, the answer actually is B. So plaque is a little bit more specific. Um, so yeah, plaque is this greenish black hard deposits that are around the corners of your teeth, and it is a sticky film of bacteria. And if you don't remove the plaque regularly, it hardens and can lead to things like gum disease and tooth decay. But this very hard greenish black deposit itself is called the plaque. It's called a plaque. And that can lead to gum disease and tooth decay, but it's not the direct description. So this is what a plaque looks like here. Everyone see this picture? On the side, you can see a lot of these um, sort of greenish, yellowish deposits. All of those are plaques, and they are a sticky film of bacteria. This is all of bacteria. That's what a plaque is. But a dental caries, this option C, caries, is a scientific term for tooth decay. You can just think of your tooth being um, kind of craved out like this. And it is caused by bacteria that produces acids from sugar. And these acids slowly break down the tooth enamel, just the outer surface. A cavity is this visible hole or damage that results from caries. So this is a cavity. So it's like when your tooth is being like digged up and you can see this hole. That's a cavity. And things like these too. When the acids start degrading your teeth like this, starts breaking it down. Okay, so let's move on. A little bit more about the tooth. Can anyone answer this question? The hard outer surface of the tooth is called what? And you can look at the picture on the right too. Oh, yes, if you said D, then yeah, that is correct. The answer is D, enamel. And you can see from the structure of this tooth that this white surface is called an enamel. Enamel, sorry. This white part. It's called an enamel. And then what's below is called the dentin. So it's not the most outer surface. The most outer surface is the enamel. And then below there are other structures. Okay, but yeah, let's look at this next structure question. Which of the following parts of the tooth is embedded in the jaw? What is in the jaw, do you think? So embedded means being put into, like being inserted into. Yeah, I think I heard maybe B, or are you saying B, the neck, which is this part? So this part, the neck? Or yeah, I think I heard someone say C. Are you saying the root, which is this whole part? Yeah, that's correct. It's actually the root. Yeah, is the answer. Because if you look at the structure, the crown is what's on the very top. Yeah, crown is on the very top. You can think about a person wearing a crown, and it's on the very top. And then the neck is in the middle. It's over here. That's the neck. And then the root is what is embedded in the jaw, what is in the jaw. So, yeah, this whole root part is in the jaw. So that's why the answer is C, root. Yeah, great job. So, yeah, let's look at this question. So a boy who is 17 years old is a what? What is like the classification of 17 years old?
The answer is B, adolescent.
Oh, yes, that's correct. Yeah, great job. The answer is B, the adolescent. So 17, if you're 17, then you can see from this picture that you're in this stage of adolescence. It actually starts a little early. It starts at a 10 and above. And then that's the early adolescence from 10 to 13, middle as adolescence if you're 14 to 16, and late adolescence when you're 17 to 19 years old. Yeah. And adult, if you're an adult, then you're above 19 years old. So, yeah. And an infant, you can see, is from 0 to 12 months old. So they're very tiny babies. Yeah. Okay. So let's move on to a different type of question. It's more about parasites and other sorts of these infections. So, which of the following organisms is an ectoparasite of an animal? Ectoparasite means living outside of our body. Ecto means outside. So this might be a little difficult, because I haven't given any examples, but the answer is A. It's called the fleas, and that's because a flea is what's living outside of our body. So things like flea, lice, tick, and mite, all of those are ectoparasites, the type of parasites that lives on the outside of the body. And other things like tapeworm, liver fluke, roundworm, all of those are endoparasites. They're called endoparasite. And they live inside our bodies and not outside. So a flea looks like this, a close-up picture of a flea, and it can live in your hair, the flea. And yeah, here are some comparisons between ecto and endoparasites. Ectoparasites like tick, lice, and fleas versus endoparasites like roundworm, whipworm, hookworm, and tapeworms. Okay, now let's look at this next question. Which of the following associations between two organisms is always beneficial to both? So now we're looking at what type of association or connection between two organisms lead to both
The answer
benefit.
is
Yeah.
B. The answer is B.
Oh, yeah. If you said B, then yeah, you're correct. If you said B mutualism. Okay, so yeah, great job. I need to maybe explain some of these terms just as a review. So, mutualism, the answer for this question, is a relationship between two organisms where both benefit. You can think of mutual as both and both benefiting. Example is like bees and flowers because bees get the nectar from the flowers and the flowers get pollinated by the bees. The commensalism, this A option, was that one benefits while the other is unaffected. Things like barnacles on the whale. So barnacles might benefit the whale, from the whale, but the whale doesn't actually benefit from the barnacles. And we have another type, saprophytism, and it's another type of like interactions between organisms where one organism, like fungi, feeds on dead organic matter. And finally, symbiosis, what it is a broad term for any two close relationships. So symbiosis is everything combined as a larger topic. Any sort of association is called symbiosis. Okay, yeah. Here lists some types of symbiosis. So again, symbiosis includes all of these interactions. We've looked at mutualism. Both are happy, right? Bees are happy and the flowers are happy in their interaction. Commensalism. So when barnacles are happy, it's the whale and the barnacles. The barnacles are happy living on the whale, but the whale is unaffected. That's called commensalism. Parasitism, however, is when one benefits while one is harmed. So a tick can feed on the cat's blood, so it's benefiting. But the cat gets skin irritation from the ticks, so it's harmful for the cats. And yeah, all of these are examples of symbiosis and where there are different types of interactions. So yeah, let's move on to the next topic today, which is mosquito control. So there are multiple ways that we can control the mosquitoes. So by mosquito control, it's by usually killing the mosquito larvae or sometimes the eggs or removing the habitat overall. So there are different methods. Biological control is when you use natural enemies of mosquitoes and things like mosquito eating fish. If you have a lot of mosquito eating fish, then a lot of the larvae will be eaten. So that's one way of control. Another way is chemical control. You control by chemicals. Things like by mineral oil, insecticides, or larvicides kill mosquitoes. So all of these things are chemicals that kill mosquitoes. There's also the environmental control. And environmental control is more about removing or ditching the stagnant water. So, you might know that stagnant water or standing water is a big source for mosquitoes. There's a lot of mosquito eggs and mosquito larvae. So it's a very high breeding ground for mosquitoes. And environmental control controls mosquitoes by removing that water. Yeah, before there was water, but after they removed the water. So no mosquitoes can be born in that area. Okay. And the last option is genetic control. It's more of like a recent change to this. It's about changing mosquito genes to reduce their population. But all of these are different types of controls that we do to control the population of mosquitoes. Okay. Let's look at this question. So, the oil from the mechanic workshop accidentally spilled into a pool of water, which was breeding mosquitoes. After some time, the pool of water was no longer breeding mosquitoes. There were no mosquitoes laying eggs there anymore. Which control method may they have deployed, do you think? So we're using oil, right? So if you look at,
The
sorry,
answer is
oh, yes, that's correct. So B, yeah, that's correct. B is the answer for this question. That's because oil, we've seen, is a part of a chemical control. So chemical control uses things like mineral oil, insecticides, and larvicides to kill the mosquitoes. Yeah, just remember, biological control is by using natural enemies. Chemical control is by using chemicals. Environmental control is by removing habitats. And genetic control is modifying genes to control mosquitoes, to kill mosquitoes. Okay. So let's look at this theory question that was on the BEC exam. So you guys can answer in maybe short sentence for each one. So can you state one chemical method of controlling mosquitoes? One chemical method. So yeah, there are quite some simple things that you can do. Um, yeah, we just looked at, yeah, do you know the answer?
using of insecticide to kill them.
Oh, yes, that's correct. Yeah, use of insecticides. Yeah, great job. That's the best way, actually. Yeah, like you said, we spray insecticides. That is a chemical method that we use to kill mosquitoes. And there are some other options that we've talked about. Things like adding oil on the surface of water also helps. Okay, so number two, it says to name the stages of the life cycle of the mosquito. We haven't looked at this really, so let's go back to the picture to answer this second question. So can everyone see this picture? Yeah, that is the life cycle of a mosquito. So we have the eggs first, and then the eggs of the mosquito turn into larvae. This is called a larva. Then a larva of a mosquito turns into pupa. It looks like this. And then finally, it goes to the surface where the adult emerges, so it becomes an adult mosquito. So that is the life cycle of a mosquito. So we can answer this question, next question. So yeah, the stages are egg, then larva, then to pupa, and then to adult. Yeah, let's look at the next question. What do you think is the stage at which feeding does not take place? I guess we haven't talked about this, but does anyone have a guess on which stage the mosquito does not eat at all?
Egg.
So maybe A as in the eggs, or so egg actually it's not the right answer. The stage at which feeding does not take place is the pupa. So it's actually the pupa that does not need feeding. And at a pupa stage, the mosquito does not eat, and it is a resting stage where transformation into adulthood occurs. So pupa is about waiting period, and the mosquito doesn't eat anything during that stage. So yeah, is everything clear so far? Um, did you understand everything? Do you have any questions? Yeah, if you have no questions, then I think I can move on. So, yeah, now let's look at how this female Anopheles mosquito is specific mosquito species that transmits malaria. So this is a malaria transmission process. So number one, what happens? A mosquito bites a person, and that's an infected mosquito. An infected mosquito bites the person. That's the first step. And they insert the parasite called Plasmodium into our body. They insert the parasite, which flows to our liver. And in our liver cells, they reside and then they duplicate and then they infect parts of our blood cells as they move on. And as the parasite progresses, another mosquito bites the infected person now. So the person is affected and it transmit that disease to the mosquito. And then that mosquito goes on to bite another person. And that's how malaria is spread. So explaining one more time. First, an infected mosquito, this mosquito is infected and it bites a person. And then the parasite that flows into our body from the mosquito infects our liver. And then it infects our blood cells. And then the mosquito drinks our blood and then takes in the parasite to their body. So mosquito is infected now. This new mosquito is infected. And then it bites another person, and then the person gets infected as well. So I hope everyone understands how malaria is spread. So yeah, this is very important, and I wanted to make sure everyone understands this concept. Yeah, if you don't have any questions or if you understand everything, then I will be moving on. But always feel free to ask me questions in the middle. But yeah, talking more about mosquitoes. So this question asks, mosquito pupa breathes through a tube called what? What do you think the tube is called? Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, if you said B, then it's actually correct. Yeah, great job. The answer is B. It's called a siphon. So this tube that is on the pupa and also the larvae too, it's called a siphon. So let's look at the structure of the mosquito, um, pupa and the larva. So this is a close-up picture of a pupa. This is a pupa. And you can see this tube that is attached to the surface, and it's breathing the air. And that tube is called a siphon. You can see from a mosquito larva too. This tube that it breathes through is called a siphon. It's just an anatomical term. Okay. Now, yeah, let's move on to this question. Which of the following insects show the egg, nymph, and adult stages of its life cycle? So we're looking at this three steps in the life cycle. And what do you think shows this? Oh, yes, if you said A, that's correct. Yeah, good job. It's one only. So the reason why it's one only is it's grasshoppers. Let's look at grasshoppers first. So grasshoppers go through this process called incomplete um, metamorphosis. It's when you go from egg to nymph to adults without a pupa stage. So without a pupa stage, um, they are just going straight from the eggs to the nymph to the adult. Things like grasshoppers, crickets, and cockroaches. But complete metamorphosis include things like um, houseflies. You can see houseflies are complete. Mosquitoes are also complete metamorphosis. They go through this process of having four distinct stages, going through larva, egg, larva, pupa, and adult. So it's going through this four process, and it includes this larva and pupa stage. So that's the difference. So yeah, I hope everyone understands this topic. Okay. Now let's look at this question. An organism that lives on decaying organic matter, contaminates human food, feeds on rotten fruits, and transfers germs is most likely a what? What is that organism? Oh, yeah, I think I heard someone say C. Does anyone agree or disagree? Does everyone think the answer is C for this question? Yeah, if you said C, then that's correct. It's the houseflies. So these are the houseflies, and houseflies are usually, yeah, the ones that live on decaying organic matter, and they often contaminate human food, and they feed on rotten fruits and transfers germs to humans and other animals. So they are a source of transferring germs. Okay, those are houseflies, and for reference, what fungus is it grows on decaying matter, but it does not contaminate food or transfer germs themselves. Houseflies are the ones who does that, who transfers the germs. Okay, let's look at this next question. Which of the following diseases can be classified as a viral disease or being caused by a virus? Oh, a virus. Do you think that is? Yeah. Yeah, if you said B, then that's correct. Yeah, good job. The answer is B. And you might be wondering what H1N1 is. And this is actually a subtype of a certain virus. It's an influenza virus. You might have heard of it before, but it's just a type of a viral disease. And candidiasis is a fungal infection. It's not a viral infection. And meningitis is the inflammation of membranes covering the brain and the spinal cord. But it's not directly linked to a viral disease. There can be multiple causes. Things like bacteria and fungi, they can cause meningitis too. It's not a simply a viral disease. And then finally, the ringworm is a skin infection that is caused by a type of fungus. So it's a fungal disease, not a viral disease. Okay. So yeah, here is the examples of options that we've seen so far. So H1N1, this type of influenza virus, meningitis, it's an inflammation of our brain and the spinal cord. Then we have candidiasis, which is a fungal infection, and then a ringworm, also a type of fungal infection. Okay, so let's move on to this question. So to stop the spread of a disease caused by a dirty environment, one must do what of the following? What do you think the answer is?
D.
Yeah, can you repeat that, please?
D. Practice personal hygiene.
Oh, yes, great job. That's correct. Yeah, it's practicing personal hygiene. And that's most important to stop the spread of disease caused by dirty environment. So that should be the number one thing that you should be concerned about. Since diseases caused by dirty environment, things like cholera, we've looked at cholera, typhoid fever, infectious diarrhea, and we can avoid that by practicing personal hygiene, such as washing your hands, bathing, keeping your surroundings clean, and all of that helps prevent the spread of these disease. So yeah, great job. The answer is D, personal hygiene. Okay, let's look at the next question, next topic. Or let's look at other answer choices too, like eating a healthy diet. So you might be wondering, why is that not correct? And things like maybe regular exercise, avoiding alcohol, they help prevent diseases in general, but specific to the dirty environment, the best thing to do is practicing personal hygiene. So that's why that D is the answer. Okay, so let's look at this structure question about the fish. So the structure which enables a fish to breathe in water is called what do you think? Oh, yeah, did you say B? I think I heard it immediately. Does anyone have other answers or do you all think B is the right answer? Yeah, B, do you think? Yeah, that's correct. The answer is B, the gills. And you can see that the gills are the respiratory organs of the fish. Fish do not have lungs, so it's not lungs. It's the gills that serve this purpose of breathing oxygen, absorbing oxygens, and expelling carbon dioxide. And every animal needs oxygen to live because oxygen is very important for cellular respiration. When we need energy, we use oxygen. Okay, so it's the gills that take in oxygen for the fish. Now let's look at this question. Maybe it's a little subtle question, but to test for starch in a green leaf, it is usually boiled to do what? What do you think the answer is? So this might be a little bit difficult, but yeah, did you say D to this? Um, well, the actual answer is B. It's actually to kill the leaf. So we didn't actually study this a lot, but we boil the leaf to kill it first, and then you can see the process. It's about killing the leaf by boiling, and then we put it in ethanol, and then we test it with starch, with iodine solution. So boiling the leaf in the water kills it, and that helps stop all the chemical processes that are occurring in the leaf. But yeah, the answer is B. It's to kill the leaf. Okay. That's about testing a leaf for starch. But let's look at this next question. So the ovary, style, and stigma are collectively known as what in the flower, do you think? So I heard maybe A or maybe B's, but yeah, I simply put it here, but the answer is pistils. Yeah, it's because you can see a pistil has three parts into this. The stigma, which is this part at the very top, the styly, just the stem in the middle, and then the ovary down at the bottom here. And this part is the female part of the flower. And the pollen is usually absorbed in and stick to the stigma here. So that's why the answer is B. The pistil includes all these three parts. And the opposite part, the male part of the flower, is actually called the stamen, and it is composed of anther and filament, and they play a role in producing the pollen. Yeah. So that's actually the next question here. So the part of the flower that produces pollen grains is called what? What produces the pollen? Maybe I'm hearing A. Maybe I heard A. Um, but we're looking for a very specific answer. So the answer is actually D, the anther. But the stamen actually includes both the anther and the filament. So as a system, it produces pollen, but specifically what produces pollen grain itself is on the anther. Do you see this tiny um yellow buds, sort of, and the flowers. Those are called the anther, and they produce the pollen grains. Yeah. Okay. So to look at what pollination actually is, so pollination is the process by which pollen is transferred from the male part of the flower, again called the anther, remember, to the female part called the stigma, to the same flower to or to another flower of the same species. And it happens usually through a pollinator. You can see like a bee is a pollinator, or a butterfly is also a pollinator. They carry the pollen to another flower from the anther to the stamen. So let's look at this question. All flowering plants end their life cycle with which process, you think? At the end, what happens? You think? Yeah, I think I heard maybe C, or is that right? So who thinks it's C for this question? Yeah, because I think I heard someone say C, and that's correct. It's about the seed dispersal. So you can see in the plant life cycle that all cycle starts with the seed germination after the seed has been dispersed, right? So after the seed has been dispersed, it's spread away to a lot of different locations. And that's where the life cycle starts as the seed germination. So at the end of a plant's life, the plant must spread its seeds across. And that starts a new plant life cycle. So remember that the end of the plant life cycle is the seed dispersal, where seeds are spread away. Germination, however, is the start of the life cycle, really. Germination means beginning to grow. So those are the end. This is the end of the life cycle. Germination is the start of the life cycle. Okay. All right. So let's look at this next theory question. So the diagrams on the right here illustrate a setup used to study the conditions for seed germination. The flasks are kept 25 degrees Celsius during the experiment. So this is a little bit complicated, so I'm going to help you through this problem at first, and I hope everyone understands why it is correct. So number one asks, what conclusion can be drawn from the results of flask 1 and flask 2? So we're looking at two options here, flask 1 and flask 2. So you can see that flask 1 and flask 2 both have a moist cotton wool. So both are getting water. Both of them are getting water. However, flask 2 has an aluminum foil covering the seeds. So the seeds are not getting light. But what happens if you let them grow? You let them grow after 2 days. You can see both the flask 1 and the flask 2 had their seeds germinated, meaning the plants grew, right, from the seeds. But what can you notice is the difference between the flask 1 and flask 2? The only difference was that there was no light for flask 2, right? There was no light for flask 2. There was both water in both cases, but no light in flask 2. But both ultimately grew, so we can conclude that light is not necessary for germination. And these types of questions, what you should be doing is you should be comparing two different experiments and looking at what they set as the difference. So here they set light as the difference, and we look at the results. Both grew, so it seems that light is not necessary for plants to grow. So, number 2 asks, what conclusion can be drawn from the results of flask 2 and flask 3? So, if we have, if you look at flask 2 and flask 3, so if you look at flask 2 and flask 3, the difference is that flask 2 has a moist cotton wool. It has water. So yes, it has water. But flask 3 does not have water. That's the only difference. And you can see that the seeds germinated for flask 2 and did not germinate for flask 3. So since there was a difference in germination, we can say that the water is necessary for germination. And this might be a little bit confusing, this question as a whole, but the difference is that you have to notice what's being tested. So in this case, between 2 and 3, the difference was having water. Having water affected the germination. So we can conclude that water is necessary for germination. Okay, let's look at question 3 of this theory question. The seedlings in flask 2 died after 2 weeks. What can be the reason why flask 2 died after 2 weeks of germination? Well, I guess the only difference was not having light, right? So not having light, it enabled initial germination. So it allowed the plant to grow first in the beginning, but it did not last for a long time. And we can notice that the sunlight then serves as an important part in plant growth. So, yeah, this theory question was, um, I think one of the most difficult ones I think we've looked at for BECE science. But you need to know what is being tested between two flasks and what the results tell you about that. So I hope everyone understands, or at least understand a little bit of what the question is asking. So you'll be able to answer in the exam. So, I mean, just going back a little bit, we can notice that according to this experiment, we can say that germination can occur without light. But when the seed needs further growth, we need the light for plants to grow for a long time and survive a long time. Because light is important for photosynthesis, where plants produce their own energies. But plants cannot do that without sunlight. So they die after 2 weeks or die early. So you only need water for germination. You can
Okay, okay, sure.
Okay, we talked about this theory question, but this is the process is not important. The question is really asking about the experiment and the variables, but all you need to know is that light is not necessary for germination and water is necessary for germination. Okay. Okay. So let's look at two different digestive systems of the two domestic animals that were provided. So one is that of a goat and the other is of a rabbit. And it says to outline three features that would help to differentiate between the two digestive systems. So this question, I think it's also a part of a theory question, but you need to know the difference between what's called the ruminant animal and the non-ruminant animal. So the ruminant animal have four stomach compartments. So they're called ruminant animals because they contain the rumen and the reticulum, omasum, obomasum. You don't need to know the exact words, but just know that they have four stomach compartments. And they do a process called rumination, which is regurgitating food, like vomiting out food, and then chewing it again. So they're very efficient at digesting cellulose, and the rumen is the fermentation site. And these ruminant animals include things like cow, sheep, goat, giraffe, and deer. There's also the non-ruminant animals, which have a single chambered stomach, Like us humans have single chambered stomach, and rumination does not occur. We don't like vomit out food and chew it again. And for fermentation site, it varies. Like for herbivores, it's the hindgut, but for other animals, monogastric animals like humans, there are no fermentation sites. And non-ruminant animals include pig, dog, rabbit, and humans. So yeah, I'll let you maybe write down notes or look at it for a little bit before I move on if you want to. About sorry if you couldn't hear me, but I was just talking about ruminant animals and not ruminant animals. Ruminant animals having four stomach compartments where rumination is vomiting out food, chewing it again, and then they have a fermentation site at the rumen. And yeah, we have given some examples, things like cow, sheep, goat, giraffe, deer. And then we had non-ruminant animals, which had single-chambered stomach. Rumination or vomiting and chewing food again does not occur. And examples include pig, dog, rabbit, and humans. I was just talking about that and talking also about the ruminant animals having four chambers. You can see here, one, two, three, four. Fermentation occurring in the rumen. We've looked at that in cows as well. And fermentation is where microorganisms break down plant fiber or cellulose. Okay. And that's how we got to this question. So, yeah, I was saying that the answer you guys said was right. Did you say D for this question? A rabbit? And if you said rabbit, then that is correct. So, the cattle, the sheep, and the goat, all of these three options on top, they have four stomach chambers. And, fermentation occurs in the rumen for these three animals. But rabbit has only one stomach. So that's why they're called monogastric animal. And rabbit actually is a herbivore. So fermentation occurs. All herbivores essentially require fermentation because they require eating plants. Okay, let's move on. The term used to describe a rabbit giving birth is, I gave out the answer for this one. It's already on here, but you just need to know some of the terminology, maybe. So, C, kindling, is the term used to describe rabbit giving birth. And other terms like culling is removing unwanted animals from the herd. Dubbing, what that is trimming a rabbit's ears. And weaning is separating the young from the mother. So kindling is the correct answer for this question. Let's move on to this next question. So, what is Charles Darwin famous for? So, what do you think Charles Darwin is famous for? Is it A, discovering penicillin, B, his work on the origin of the universe, C, his work in the field of physics, or D, his theory of natural selection? Yeah, I haven't really, talked about Charles Darwin specifically yet, but he is, like I think some of you said, is D, his theory of natural selection. So A, actually discovering penicillin was discovered by someone else called Alexander Fleming. The origin of the universe was, again, developed by not Charles Darwin, but other scientists, other physicists, like Big Bang Theory for Georges Lemaitre, and C, the work in physics were famous for like Isaac Newton or Albert Einstein and people like those. But Charles Darwin, he was famous for his natural selection theory. So he proposed this theory of evolution by natural selection. And this explains a lot of how organisms evolved over time. So if we look at this next picture here, this is Darwin's theory of evolution. So as known as the natural selection theory. Natural selection, as Darwin proposed, is a process in which organisms that are better suited to their environment survive longer and have more babies. So he believed that whatever made organisms survive for longer, they will adapt and evolve to that in the future. And these organisms pass their traits to the offspring, so they slowly evolve and change. An example of this is a giraffe with long necks. You can see that this giraffe on the very right, it has a very short neck, and it cannot reach the leaf that is on the tall tree. And it grew a little bit, but this giraffe also could not reach the leaf, and it could not survive for long. So that's why, as time passed, giraffes evolved to have a long neck to reach the tall plants that are on the tree, as they can eat the leaves that are on the tall tree. So that was Darwin's theory of evolution, the basics, the natural selection theory by Charles Darwin. Okay, I think this is where we're gonna stop for today. I think the next couple of slides has to do with like chemistry and mixtures, but I think we will continue that a little bit next time. And yeah, that'll be the end for today's lesson. Does anyone have any question for today? If any questions, you can ask me now. Yeah, any questions for today? If you don't have any questions, that's also fine. But I think next week we will be, well, finishing up the science slides, and we will also look at agriculture for next week. So, yeah, I think that's the plan for next week, and I can send you the slides over for the BEC science slide. So you can look at those slides and maybe write down notes at your own pace as well. So, yeah, if you don't have any questions, then I'll see everyone next week then. All right. Yeah. Bye, everyone. If you don't have questions, bye.